Good evening and welcome to Finances, Funerals, and Finale, My Way. My name is Mickey McIntyre and I'll be your moderator today. Just a reminder, the recording is in progress. So before we get started, just remember to please note that everyone is in view-only mode. This means both your audio and video functions are disabled and neither will appear in the recording. We will have a formal Q&A session at the end of each presentation. To ask a question of today's panelists, type your question into the Q&A box on your screen and click send. Please note, check send anonymously if you do not want your name attached to your question in the Q&A. We will answer as many questions as we can during the designated time. As a reminder, Compassionate Choices provides details of resources and services developed by other organizations as a service to our listeners and watchers. Inclusion in this webinar does not imply any endorsement. Compassionate Choices is the nation's oldest, largest, and most active nonprofit working to improve care, expand options, and empower everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. We envision a society that affirms life and accepts the inevitability of death, embraces expanded options for compassionate dying, and empowers everyone to choose end-of-life care that reflects their values, priorities, and beliefs. And today we have a number of panelists who are ready to join us to talk about planning for the end of life in a different way than we typically do. Kim Callanan, the president and CEO of Compassionate Choices, will be your host for today's conversations. And they will feature Rick Edelman, one of the foremost financial experts, podcasters, the longest running financial radio show, and a New York Times bestselling author. Joelle Simon Anthony, a funeral director, and Lauren Leroy, also a licensed funeral director, both of whom share celebrity status on YouTube as The Grave Woman, and Little Missed Funeral. We're looking forward to an exciting discussion today. Kim, you want to take it away?
I will. Thank you so much, Mickey. It really is a pleasure to be here today, and I am excited to get a chance to bring to our listeners a slightly different take around end of life. The vast majority of the time, we at Compassionate Choices are talking about end of life care and how to plan for end of life care. But I often see the other side of the coin, which is financial planning at the end of life, and also planning for funeral service and memorials as things that many of our supporters are interested in. So I'm delighted to today be able to bring to you some experts in the field to answer some of your questions related to these topics and to deepen your knowledge, and hopefully coming out of this, you will do something that I need to do, which is stop procrastinating and really focus on taking care of all of the important end of life aspects around the end of life. So with that, I am looking forward to introducing our very first speaker, guest. His name is Rick Edelman, and as Mickey mentioned, he is one of the foremost experts in financial planning. I have had the benefit of being on a panel with him in the past, and I know that you're going to enjoy learning from him as I have. He is a New York Times bestselling author. He owns one of the largest financial planning organizations in the country. He's a radio host, a PBS star, and I am really delighted to now introduce to you Rick Edelman. Welcome, Rick. It's a delight to have you here today.
Good to be with you, Kim. Thanks.
So, Rick, let's talk first about the climate that we're currently in. We are in such a dynamic environment, and it seems like things change daily. You've got the COVID-19 pandemic, there's racial unrest, you've got fires, you've got the president's health status, and all of these things impact the economy and create a level of uncertainty. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you a little bit about like, what does somebody do in this constant state of uncertainty to plan for around financial planning in the end? What would your recommendation be? How should someone get started?
You've described the scenario pretty well, Kim. I think we're all acutely aware of the turmoil that this year has provided to us, unprecedented in our lifetimes. And it's easy for us all to feel out of control. And what we need to recognize is that these events are, in fact, beyond our control. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We understand that. But that doesn't mean that life has to be completely beyond our control. In fact, there are many aspects of our lives that we fully control. And so what we need to recognize is that fact and to take advantage of the opportunities that we have before us. For example, we are in total control of our spending and our saving ability. We are in control of our goal setting. We are in control of dealing with our estate planning. So although we are not necessarily in control of whether or not we're going to be unemployed, we might not be in control of our health, we might not be in control of who wins the election, we certainly do retain significant levels of control within our own lives. And so we need to recognize that fact and take advantage of it. And you'll discover that when you do take control over small parts of your life, it makes you feel an awful lot better and helps you have hope and optimism about the future.
Wow, that's a really terrific framework and an observation. And I know for many of our supporters, one of the reasons that they come and support our issue is because they do want to have control all the way throughout their life till the very end. So I suspect that sort of concept of taking control of your finances will really resonate with our supporters. We do see around end of life planning, I've seen that many people have far more time on their hands than they previously did as they are home and they're not out and about or traveling. And I'm curious, given the free time, what are some of the neglected items that are often on people's to-do lists as it relates to estate planning that people might be able to take care of in this moment?
Well, estate planning is one of the most frequently neglected subjects. Less than half of American adults have a will. And there are obvious reasons why that is. Number one, it's not a fun subject to contemplate one's death. Number two, most of us feel immortal. I'm never going to die. You talk to a 20-something or 30-something, they truly cannot contemplate their mortality. They feel invincible. And procrastination sets in. We've got a lot of stuff going on in our lives, even though we've had a massive lifestyle change due to COVID. We're not, as you said, traveling overseas or even across the country. We're not going out to dinner or to the movies or to events and arenas and so on the way we used to. We're not gathering at friends' houses like we were. We're still plenty busy. We're just busy in different ways. And so we'll worry about it later. And what we have to recognize is that procrastination is the #1 enemy of personal finance. The notion that I'll get around to it, I'll do it later, I have plenty of time, those are all steps in the wrong direction. So we need to recognize that we are all mortal, that we have, in most cases, relationships and obligations involving others, and we need to protect ourselves, which is the first purpose of estate planning, and then we need to protect our loved ones, our spouse, our children, our grandchildren, our communities, which is the second part of estate planning. There used to be a third part, which is avoiding taxes, but under current tax law, very, very few Americans have to worry about estate taxes. It's not something most people need to focus on these days. I mean, you need to be married with well more than $22 million, so that's not most Americans anymore. So recognize that you need to deal with it. And in a weird way, COVID is actually increasing the urgency of the conversation because, as we've seen, COVID kills indiscriminately. It infects people randomly, and it is killing people at horrifyingly young ages. Although 80% of the deaths are those over 65, let's face it, people 65, 70, 80, they themselves weren't expecting to die at that age. And so it ratchets up our reminder that we do need to tend to our estate planning. But it's not just due to COVID. Frankly, anybody age 18 or older needs to have a proper estate plan.
And I know it's interesting because I'm so much this sort of conversation and discussion around estate planning really does parallel the experience that we go through with end of life planning. And I know one of the things that we see with end of life planning is a disparity in who plans for the end, with communities of color less likely to plan, and then it resulting in more unwanted and aggressive treatment at the end of life. And I'm curious, you look at estate planning, and it's so important for ensuring that generational wealth continues. And I'm wondering whether or not that disparity that we see in planning at the end exists among communities of color with financial planning as well. Is that something you're familiar with?
Yes, there is a disparity in that area. And what the national statistics from the life insurance industry tells us is that minorities are much less likely to own life insurance. And when they do own life insurance, they generally only have what are referred to as burial coverage, meaning enough insurance to pay for the funeral. And the attitude is, I don't want to be a burden to the family when I pass, so let's make sure there's enough money to bury me and pay for the funeral, et cetera, et cetera. Which is wonderful, but it doesn't go far enough. Whereas white Americans are more likely to have income replacement coverage, meaning that whatever incomes they're generating to the household, either from their job, their earned income, or their pension income or Social Security income, all of that goes away upon death. So white families are more likely to get life insurance to allow their survivors to continue that income stream by virtue of lots of life insurance coverage. $500,000, $1 million worth of life insurance. Black Americans and Latino Americans are much less likely to have large insurance policies. They're more likely to have a $5,000 or $10,000 policy than they are $1 million policy. So what that does is perpetuate the wealth disparity and the wealth inequities that exist in America. White families tend to provide more income replacement and wealth replacement to help their families stay in the income brackets and wealth brackets that they're at, whereas Black Americans, who tend to be more often in lower income and lower wealth brackets in the first place, are perpetuating that for their heirs because they're not providing large amounts of insurance benefits that could provide the ability for those heirs to have larger lifestyles, or frankly, pay for college, which leads to higher income occupations and the opportunity to create wealth and so on. So yes, it is a fact that there are disparities based on race in America.
Yeah, and I assume some of these are really systemic issues that need to be addressed. When you think about the estate planning and end of life, is this something that, can you do a will on your own? Is this something that, there's an inexpensive way to accomplish this without having a huge sum of money?
Yes, there are ways to do it now, thanks to the internet. You can pretty much do anything on the internet these days. And there are some online sites that allow you to do free or low cost, do-it-yourself wills and legal documents. As a professional financial advisor, I don't really recommend those sites because the one-size-fits-all boilerplate documents, fill in the blank. You don't know if you're covering everything that's needed. You don't know if these documents are dealing with all of the nuances and individual unique circumstances in your life and in regarding your family, such as if you have special needs children or caring for aging parents, or if you have a multiple generational family or a mixed marriage. And when I say that, what I mean is you've got multiple marriages, you've got a prior spouse, a current spouse, you have children from prior marriages, the so-called Brady Bunch tic-tac-toe board, where you've got just a complicated family tree. And these do-it-yourself documents may not accommodate all of those nuances. But still, it's better than nothing. And the good thing to remember about estate planning is that it's not permanent. It isn't irrevocable. If you create your own documents and you sign those documents and put it into place, that doesn't mean you're stuck with it. You can change it anytime you like. So don't worry about doing something and then regretting it, because you can just do a new document and it voids the old document. So yes, you can get this stuff online pretty easily, and there are basic documents. A will, which says who you want to get your stuff. A medical directive, which I'm sure you'll talk about throughout this program, on your preferences regarding medical treatment, and a power of attorney, and particularly a durable power for healthcare, which allows somebody to make medical decisions on your behalf, basically honoring your preferences in the medical directive if you're not able to express your wishes on yourself. Maybe you're in a coma or otherwise unable to convey your attitude to your doctors. These documents and the person you designate does it on your behalf. So these documents are readily available. And if you prefer, and to go about it the way that I recommend, you talk to a professional. You go to an estate planning attorney. You'd be surprised. It's not terribly expensive. And considering the implications, the peace of mind is worthwhile.
That's really helpful and a good framing, and it lets people know that I know some people I hear feel like I don't want to bother filling it out because I don't have very much left to live. So for those people, at a minimum, take the time to find an online source and fill it out. And for others, it sounds like, you can go to an estate attorney and it's not as expensive as perhaps one thinks. I do want to note on the healthcare side of things, we're not actually going to cover this on that call because that's what the vast majority of our calls are about. So if anyone on this phone has not done your advanced care planning, if you go to our Compassion and Choices Finish Strong and under the Plan Your Care section of our website, you will see the Staying Stronger Together webinar series has a whole host of webinars related to advanced care planning. There's one that our National Medical Director, Dr. Grube, did that is particularly good related to COVID-19. So I would encourage people to check that out if you have not done your advanced care plans. Returning back to the financial side of things, I'm wondering, Rick, what happens if somebody doesn't fill this out? Who gets your money?
Well, it depends on the state where you live. Theoretically, most folks want to generally leave the money to their spouse, if they have one, and then to their children, if they have them. So it's a two-step process. If the spouse dies first, then the money goes to the kids. But that's not the case in all states. If you don't have a will, you die in what's called intestate, meaning without a will. And that means your assets will be distributed in accordance with state law. And that law may not agree with what you want to do. In other words, depending on the state you live and depending on your family tree, assets could go to siblings, they could go to cousins, they could go to parents instead of children. In some cases, if you have improper documentation, for example, bad beneficiary designations. This is a big subject I'll elaborate on in a minute, but it's conceivable that your assets could go to an ex-spouse instead of your current spouse.
Wow.
So you need to make sure that you do have your documents in place, because if you don't, then your money won't go the way you are thinking it's going. And let me just add one final elaboration on this notion of beneficiaries. Do you own life insurance? Do you have an IRA? Do you have a retirement plan at work? 401k, 403b, 457, the TSP for the government? Do you have an annuity? If you have any of those, remember when you filled out the paperwork to open the account, they asked you to name your beneficiary. Well, how many years ago was that? Do you even remember what you wrote? Chances are you don't. And you might have written that out so many years ago that you had a different spouse, or you didn't have 2 of your 4 children, or 7 of your 12 grandchildren, because it was so many years ago. So you need to make sure your beneficiary designations are current, complete, and in sync with your true desires. Otherwise, your money will end up going to family members that you don't really have in mind.
And what happens if you have a will and it says you want, your whatever's left to go to your husband, but then you have an IRA and it lists a specific person? How does that get resolved?
Well, you have basically 2 categories of assets. You have IRAs, and I should say everything where there's a beneficiary, your IRA, your retirement plan at work, annuities, etc., plus joint accounts. So if you own an asset with another person, like your house is owned jointly with you and your spouse, or if you have a bank account with you and your son, those are jointly held assets. So all of that passes directly to the heir in something called operation of law. So that's it. No muss, no fuss. Your IRA goes directly to your beneficiary immediately upon death. Your will controls everything else. It doesn't control the IRA or the 401k. It doesn't control your jointly owned house. It controls all your other stuff, like your TV. like the car that's in your name only, or your jewelry, your artwork. Everything that's in your house, all your worldly possessions are covered by the will. And this is why if you don't have a will, the state will take over and determine who gets what. And even if you have a will, the will doesn't trump the IRA account. So the IRA wins first, no matter what the will says. So even if you get a will and it says everything goes to my spouse, if the IRA account says something different, that's what wins, not the will. So you got to make sure you do both documents correctly, the beneficiary designations and your will.
And what about with debt? So suppose that you die with more debt than assets. Do your heirs inherit your debt?
Generally, no. But in some cases, yes. For example, if you die, the probate court is generally going to put a delay on how quickly your heirs get your money, because they want to give creditors an opportunity to come forward. They want to let Visa say, wait a minute, they owed me money. So don't give their money to their kids. Let me get my money back first. You know, if you owe money to the car for buying a car and you got a car loan, that lender wants to come forward and say, well, you can't give them the car to the kids. That car belongs to us until that loan gets paid off. So creditors will have generally a year, maybe more, to come forward to the court to say they owe us money. After those debts are paid off and those creditors are satisfied, whatever's left will go to the kids. And by that time, no, the children and the other heirs will not be obligated for any of the debts that the decedent had. So if you die owing Visa a lot of money, the Visa cannot go after the kids, except for the money that you are giving the kids. But they can't go after the kids for the kids' own money. If you own a house, then yeah, you got to pay off the mortgage on the house before the house can go to the kids. But other than that, no, you don't have to worry about it. And generally speaking, there could be exceptions in certain cases, but generally, no, don't worry about it if the decedent had debts.
And what do you find are the most common mistakes that people make when it comes to estate planning?
Well, the first is not doing it at all. That's the biggest mistake. The second is treating it like a product rather than a process. In other words, they treat it like something you do once. Great, I got my legal documents, I threw them in a drawer. That was 10 years ago or 30 years ago, and I haven't looked at it since. It's an ongoing process because your life evolves, your health changes, your marital status, the family dynamics, your attitude changes over who you want to receive your money. So you need to periodically review your documents. Tax law changes and all kinds of issues. So our attitude is that if there has been, since you've last looked at your estate plan and your legal documents, if there has been a change in the law, a change in your marital status, a change in your health, a change in your net worth, your income, your assets, a change in your attitude, or if only 5 years has passed, even if nothing of those things have changed, if 5 years have passed, go read the documents that you signed. Make sure you still agree with what they say. And if so, great. And if not, call your lawyer and revise the documents.
Okay, you've now motivated me, Rick, because I did my estate when my daughter was born, and she celebrated her 22nd birthday last week. So it sounds like I am overdue and need to go ahead and dust off the estate and take a look at it. So.
Well, yeah, I'm sure that when she was born, you named a guardian upon your death, someone to raise your daughter.
Guardian.
Well, she's 22. That clause is no longer relevant. And in fact, you probably said, if I die, my money is to be placed into trust on behalf of my daughter. Well, she's 22. Maybe you want to give her the money now. Or maybe you want to do something different and say, she's only 22. I don't want to give her the money now. Let's make her wait till she's 35. Or let's give her a monthly allowance between now and then. Or let's just let her have money only to buy a house or pay for medical bills. In other words, this is a wonderful opportunity to update the estate plan because the dynamics have changed.
Yeah. She's actually 18, but it doesn't really change your point. And I'm curious, would you trust an 18-year-old? Like is there any advice around sort of the age at which you trust a person?
Well, you know your child best. And there are some 18-year-olds who are incredibly mature, responsible adults. And there are other 18-year-olds where if you give them an inheritance, the only question is, what color is the Corvette? So you need to decide if your child is ready to receive the money. And I would strongly encourage that with an inheritance comes a strong dose of education. so that they don't squander the money and they use it prudently and properly to their genuine long-term benefit and not just, playing online video games.
So how do you actually write that into the will? You write a certain amount of education is required, or what is?
You can do whatever you want. That's the neat thing about estate planning. It's your money. You get to do anything you want. Ain't America great? So you can say they get the money under the following conditions. And those conditions can be anything from they got to marry somebody I approve of to they got to stand on one foot for 20 minutes. I mean, you can do whatever you like. Most people generally say they got to reach a certain age, like 35 or 45. They can use the money only for housing. They can use the money for starting a business or paying debts or whatever, going to college. Be careful about one important aspect. I see it a lot among our clients, and it's a big mistake. Be careful about trying to manage people's lives from the grave. For example, one of my clients said their son could use their inheritance only to buy a house. They died, the money went to the son, he immediately bought a house, which is the only permission he had, and then he immediately sold the house to get the cash. So don't try to manage assets from the grave. Instead, manage your children during your lifetime. Instill in them the values and virtues that you want them to carry with them throughout their entire lives. Give them the education about proper money management so that when they do become of age and receive their inheritance, they will use the money for their genuine long-term benefit as you hope and aspire.
Yeah, very, very wise advice. One of the conditions that we're seeing come up more and more, 1 in 3 seniors ends up dying with dementia. And I know among our supporter base, there's a huge amount of concern. I'm curious from a financial planning perspective, is there anything in particular that needs to be put in place should somebody end up with dementia to ensure that their wishes are still being honored from a financial perspective?
Yeah, my mom's got Alzheimer's. She's 93. And so, yeah, it is something that is increasingly common. We're spending a lot of time in Alzheimer's research, my wife and I, and very large supporters of many of the wonderful organizations dealing with this. 1 in 10 Americans at age 65 have Alzheimer's. It's 1 in 3 by age 85, and it's 1 in 2 by age 90. And since life expectancy is now 86, it is highly likely that you or your spouse will develop Alzheimer's. At the moment, there is no diagnostic tool, there is no treatment, there is no cure, and there's no vaccine. The only way they know that you've got Alzheimer's is through a biopsy, rather an autopsy. Pretty rotten way to find out you have a disease. So it is horrifying, and it is unfortunately in the futures of a great many of us, if not ourselves personally, then our loved ones. So we need to anticipate that Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia may be in our future. And this is it increases the incredible level of importance that we have the proper estate planning in place. What level of treatment do you want should you be so diagnosed or afflicted? What methods of care do you want to receive? What protections do you want to put in place for not only for your own treatment, but for your net worth, your income, your assets, and the inheritances that you're trying to preserve for your survivors? We must do advanced planning, because by the time you are suffering from this disease, you will not be in any mental state to be able to deal with it at that point, and much of it will be too late for your members of family to deal with it as well. So this must be tended to long in advance. In other words, right now.
That's terrific. And for those who are not familiar, Compassion and Choices on the healthcare side of things has a values and priorities tool. It's in the Plan Your Care section of our website. It is a wonderful tool that helps you to identify the various levels of care that you would want at different points within a dementia diagnosis. And it produces a customized dementia directive for your healthcare proxy. As Rick alluded to, one of the really important things is you make sure that you have got somebody who's able to carry out those wishes. That tool, I think, it could be really helpful for those who have not already taken advantage of it.
Let me mention one other final thing, Kim, if we have a moment, and that is charitable support. It is through estate planning that many people engage in the most powerful charitable support. You might not have as much money as you would like to be able to support the charities that you truly admire, including this one here this evening. It's called planned giving, and it is a very common way for people to support the charities that they really admire. For example, simply name your favorite charity or charities as among your heirs. You can name in your will that they get a specific dollar amount or a percentage of your assets, or you could even go so far as to buy a life insurance policy. One of my clients did this a number of years ago. I'm sorry to say that she just passed at this past weekend at the age of 83 of lupus. And years ago, she bought a $500,000 life insurance policy for her school where she taught at Shenandoah University. And they are now the beneficiaries of a $500,000 that she never would have been able to donate during her lifetime. But by buying a life insurance at a fraction of that cost, she was able to amplify her gift in massive ways to the benefit of the university. So you can engage in planned giving at remarkably affordable rates. Goes back to our earlier conversation about life insurance and why many people don't own any. There's a misconception in America that life insurance is expensive. It isn't. Because people are living longer than ever before, the cost of life insurance is remarkably affordable. There's really no reason for healthy people not to be buying life insurance if there's an insurable need in the family. So you can not only use insurance to protect your heirs, you can use it to support your favorite charities. There are other strategies as well regarding annuities and trust, charitable trusts, and on and on and on. This is why you talk to an estate attorney and a financial planner as well.
Thank you, Rick. And I can say from Compassion and Choices perspective that we really, really benefit from the generosity of our donors when they're alive, but also as a part of their legacy giving. And I know last year with COVID in particular, it is what got us through a really, really difficult time was having those planned gifts come in. We have an amazing planned giving director, Sam Young. So if there is anybody who's interested in exploring more about planned giving, please let us know. We can connect you with Sam. There's no pressure. And we do, in addition to offering just estate and will planning and all those kinds of things, which are fabulous, we do also have charitable gift annuities, which is a way that somebody is able to get regular money back during their lifetime by giving a contribution. And so it is a really good option for somebody who wants to do something now while they're alive, and then we get more later. And Sam is much more articulate at explaining the whole thing.
And you can also name a charity as your beneficiary in your IRA or retirement account. There's a lot of opportunity, a lot of flexibility. You don't need to be an expert in any of this. That's why you hire an advisor. We're the experts. All you got to do is be an expert in you. You know what your situation is, you know what you want, and we'll tell you how to make it happen.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick. Appreciate that. And I will turn it back over to Mickey.
So Rick, you just answered one of the questions that we got, which was, can you make a charity a beneficiary of your IRA bank account or your investment accounts or your insurances? So thanks for answering that. Also on the topic of planned giving, people were wondering about how expensive it is to maintain a CRT, provided that you are doing it for non-children heirs. Is there a difference between when you're doing it for children and not for children? And do you have some sense of what the expense is?
No, it doesn't. A CRT is a charitable remainder trust. It's one of the tools we use in estate planning for helping people leave assets to charity. There are a variety of tax benefits and income benefits and charitable benefits all wrapped up into one. There are different kinds of charitable remainder trusts. The bottom line is it doesn't really matter who the ultimate heirs or beneficiaries are of these trusts, whether it's a charity, whether it's family or non-family or whoever. The cost is associated with the legal fees of creating the trust and then the administrative or investment management fees for operating the trust. They are generally such that unless you're engaging with large amounts of money, and I would say $500,000 or more, it probably isn't worthwhile to bother doing this. There are other cheaper ways to accomplish what you're trying to do. But these kinds of estate planning and charitable planning tools are generally used for very large amounts of money, high six figures, 7, 8, 9, 10 figures of wealth.
Thanks, Rick. A couple of questions about specific kinds of debt and whether that passes to your heirs. The two that came up the most were student loan debt. Does that transfer to a surviving spouse? And also transferring to a surviving spouse, end-of-life hospital care. So anything, or emergency care.
Student loan debt does not pass to heirs. It is the only way to get rid of student loan debt other than paying it off. You can't even get rid of student loan debt by filing bankruptcy. So it's pretty draconian. So fortunately, if you die, your student loan debt dies with you. Regarding medical debt, it depends on the nature of the debt, your marital status, and the state in which you live. So you should, if you are already incurring medical debt or anticipating such, you ought to talk now with your medical provider. You know, just go call your local hospital and just ask them the question. Because it does depend on state circumstances and the nature of who it is that you owe money to. For example, do you owe money to Medicaid, or do you owe money to the insurance company? Do you owe money to private pay providers and so on? It's unfortunately complicated like the rest of our healthcare system.
Right. And speaking about insurance, how about around, what's your recommendation around long-term care insurance? Are you for that? And if so, about when should someone consider buying that?
We are very big fans of long-term care insurance, but only for certain circumstances. Let's put everybody into three buckets: the poor, the rich, and the middle class. The poor do not need to buy long-term care insurance because you're poor. You're already covered by Medicaid, which is the federal health plan for the poor. If you're rich, you don't have to buy long-term care because you're rich. You can afford to pay the cost of care. Don't worry about it. It's the rest of us. It's the middle class that have to deal with this, because the cost of care is about $8,000 a month. That's the average cost of a nursing home in America. In New York City, it's $14,000 a month. And this cost is not covered by health insurance, and it's not covered by Medicare. It's the #1 leading cause of poverty among retirees. And in fact, the over 65 cohort is the fastest growing population for bankruptcy in America because of the crushing costs of long-term care. Remember, I talked earlier about 1 in 2 households needing or going to incur Alzheimer's in their 90s. Well, it's 1 in 2 households at age 65. If you and your spouse are both 65, one of you can be expected to need long-term care at some point. How many years will you be able to write a check for $100,000 a year on top of your current expenses? This is why so many go bankrupt. And that's why we like long-term care for this group of clients. Shift the economic cost of the insurance company. The policy will cost you $6,000 or $7,000 a year instead of $8,000 a month. So it's a much more affordable way to deal with this expense. Nobody likes to buy insurance until you need it. So as much as it's distasteful for a great many middle-class American families, it is the least evil way to deal with the issue.
So would you say try and buy it as early as possible in life that you have the resources to do it?
The younger you are and you buy it, the cheaper it is on an annual basis. Unfortunately, price increases do occur because they're allowed to do that. They're not guaranteed locked-in rates. But we generally tell people to start seriously considering the purchase in their 50s. Too often people wait until they're in their 60s or 70s. Most commonly, they call us on the phone after they've been diagnosed. I just left the doctor. He told me X, I better buy a policy. Too late.
Yeah.
You've got to buy the policy before you're diagnosed with a medical issue.
So Rick, when, we have a lot of questions in the queue that we're not going to get to. So I think one of the ones that we really want to ask is, how does someone go about getting an estate planner, right? Like, what's the best way people can access someone like you or others?
Well, you need an estate attorney. We're not lawyers, so we don't do legal work. I guess that means I do illegal work. So what it really comes down to is, you can go one of two ways. You can go to the estate attorney and they'll design for you, create for you the estate plan, all the documents you need, etc. Or you can do it the way I recommend, is talk with a financial planner first. We will help you understand the concepts and the issues, design the basic framework of the plan, and work with you as you coordinate with your attorney. We work with a lot of estate attorneys. Most of our clients don't have an estate lawyer. We work with lots of them, and we can refer you to good lawyers who live and work near you. We're not getting any compensation from the lawyer. We just do this to help our clients out. And the reason it's important to involve the financial advisor is that the lawyers are focusing only on the law, only on the legal documents. They may say, for example, I'm going to create for you a trust. But what the lawyers don't do is help you title assets into the trust. That's our job. So we actually focus on implementing the estate plan that the lawyer has created to put the documents into practice. So working together with the lawyer and the financial advisor, that's how you get the whole program done correctly.
And if you don't have a financial advisor, best way to go about that is to ask at your bank for recommendations?
No, that's probably the worst place you can go.
Okay.
What you want to do is ask friends and family who are similar to you in circumstances, similar net worth, similar situation, and see if they have an advisor. Shop around the way you would for a washing machine. Interview 2 or 3 different advisors, because until you talk to them, you're not going to know if you like them and if you understand their services and their fees, etc. One thing to keep in mind is that there are basically 3 different types of advisors: stockbrokers, insurance agents, and registered investment advisors, people like me. Brokers and insurance agents, by law, do not represent your best interests. They represent their employer, the brokerage firm and the insurance company. Only RIAs, registered investment advisors, by law, serve as a fiduciary, meaning we are legally obligated to serve your best interests. We don't charge commissions. We don't sell products. We're not trying to maximize our profitability by doing a lot of trading or selling risky investments to you. We are serving in your best interest like an attorney or a physician or an accountant. And so when you're dealing with an advisor, you want to make sure they are a fiduciary. You also want to pay attention to their costs. We have a wonderful little one-pager called Understanding the Costs of Your Advisor. There's a lot of confusion about how advisors get compensated and a lot of misinformation. And this one-pager, which you can access at our website at rickedelman.com, tells you what you should be looking for in an advisor and how to understand how they get compensated so that you have your eyes wide open to find the right advisor for you.
Great. Thanks, Rick. And thanks for that resource. We do have a ton of other questions that we're not going to be able to get to tonight. I'm sorry, folks. But go to Rick's website and maybe he has some answers listed there for you as well.
And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Just go to rickedelman.com and you can send me your questions there. And I'm happy to answer all your questions online or get you in touch with one of my colleagues.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Rick. Kim?
Thanks, Rick. Thank you so much for being here. I know that our supporters really enjoyed this, and it was wonderful to get a chance to see you again.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Kim. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too. For everyone else, we are now going to go on to something that might be a little bit unexpected. Our next 2 guests are experienced licensed funeral directors with over 20 years of collective experience. But Little Miss Funeral, Lauren Leroy, and the Grave Woman, Joelle Simone Anthony, are also YouTube personalities who millions of people have watched offer practical and spiritual approaches to funerals, to grieving, and to death. I am so excited to have them here today. They are always such a pleasure to be around, so full of energy and just advice. And so thank you to both of you for being here today. I'm going to start first with Joelle. So Joelle, I wanted to talk a little bit about why funerals and memorial services are so important for us, particularly during this time of the pandemic.
Thanks, Kim, for having me. Ritual plays a huge role in our grieving and mourning process. And whether it's through religion or spirituality or expected norms at the time of death, funerals and memorials give us a form of remembering the deceased in the form of community. And with all of this isolation, especially right now during COVID, I think we're reminded of the importance of community.
Yeah. And you are seeing so many stories in the media about people who haven't had the chance to have that service and the impact that it's having on them, the isolation and the loneliness. I'm wondering whether you have any particular advice for people from communities of color or for the LGBTQ community.
Specifically for the LGBTQ community, I would say documentation. There have been heartbreaking cases that I've worked where maybe someone who was born male lived their life as a female, and due to circumstances at the end of their life, their family decided not to present them as they lived. And it's heartbreaking to think that had they had certain documentation in place, they would have been able to be remembered in the way that they lived. So things like having an advance directive, as you guys mentioned before, a healthcare proxy, funeral agent or executor in place, and then sharing that information with your family and community, having pre-need funeral arrangements in advance, planned in advance, as well as insurance in place to cover and pay for what you want. And particularly for people of color, again, understanding that insurance is necessary and not, like Rick was just saying, not just enough to cover the cost of the burial, but to continue your legacy financially for years to come. I think for both groups and for anyone, I would say to remember that you have the right to feel respected, accepted, and to be treated in a way that reflects how you would want to treat someone coming in your home as a guest when you think about funeral planning. So call around, work with a funeral home or an establishment that really makes you feel, or your family, if someone's passed away, makes them feel welcome and accepted.
I hadn't, thank you for sharing that. I guess I had never really thought about the potential that somebody could present you in your death in a way that was different from how you lived your life, and just how important that must be as your final kind of goodbye to the world. So thank you for sharing that. So Lauren, I'm going to turn to you and give you the very difficult task of laying out all the options for us. So of course, like anybody, you know, familiar with your traditional funeral and burial, but I know there's a whole bunch of other options out there. And, you know, could you just kind of give us a broad strokes of what the options are that people might want to consider?
Right. So I think that when we think about the traditional funeral, we're thinking about our grandparents' funeral, right? With the wakes, funeral services ending with a burial in an actual cemetery. You can still have that sense of tradition with ending in cremation instead. You can have burials in cemeteries, you can have entombments and mausoleums in cemeteries. You can have green burials where your body isn't being pumped with chemicals and you're going into the earth in a natural shroud or basket that's going to be biodegradable. When it comes to cremation, the sky's kind of the limit with this one. You can have your viewing ending in cremation, like I just said prior to this, but you can have what is more known as a direct cremation, meaning that there's no viewing of your physical body present within a funeral home establishment. When cremation is brought up, I think the important thing to keep in mind is that it is a final disposition, but it's not a funeral service. And at the end of cremation, there's still the thing that we have to do something with these cremated remains, right? We don't want grandma to be sitting in a shelf in our bedroom, because what happens if something happens to us then and our family sells our home and then they don't know that that box in the closet is grandma's cremated remains. So when it comes to cremation, you can keep cremated remains home with you, but I always tell families, make sure your family members and your friends know who is in your possession, and make sure you have a plan B where if something is happening to you, we know where those cremated remains are going to be going to. You can scatter cremated remains. I know that this is something that people are often confused about because they don't know the legality behind it, where they can scatter and if it's legal. It is legal. We do have to follow certain regulations when it comes to scattering cremated remains, but it's very legal. You can scatter on land, you can scatter in water. When it comes to that, you can bury cremated remains in a cemetery if you want to be more traditional with that aspect too. You can donate your body to science if that's something that you're interested in. Typically, this is paperwork that has to be taken care of prior to your passing. I can't just tell my husband, hey honey, when I pass away, donate my body to the medical school. That's not how these things work. And I think that this whole webinar is a good reminder of that we have to make certain that we have our paperwork in place ahead of time. So really, burial and cremation are your two popular options, but when it comes to cremation, the things you can do with cremated remains afterwards too, from turning yourself into a diamond to planting yourself in the ground and having a tree come up from that too. The sky's really the limit when it comes to what you want to do.
So I want to follow up on one thing you said on a personal level. So my grandfather chose cremation, and we have his remains in a box right now, and he asked to be sprinkled over the Calder racetrack. And my mom and I have both been afraid we were going to like get in trouble if we did it. So they're still sitting there in the box. So are you saying we can sprinkle them over the Calder racetrack and that's like legal?
Well, typically it's frowned upon greatly if you're doing it in a public area. That's why you want to make certain before you do scatter cremated remains, you are checking with your local laws and regulations as to the areas in which to scatter. Typically, your own private property is the way to go when you are doing scattering of cremated remains, or working with an organization that can help you if you do want to do something that's out of the ordinary. There are so many stories of people scattering cremated remains in like Disneyland and all these popular places, and that's really that is really frowned upon.
That was what I thought. I was hoping you were going to give me a different answer so my poor grandfather could end up where he wanted to be, but we'll figure it out. How does a person start this planning? When should they start thinking about them? I know I hear stories a lot of the impact it has when someone hasn't thought this through on the family, and I've seen it and witnessed it firsthand. When should you start this?
Just like we've been talking about, you want to start it now. When you don't need the services is when you want to start planning about your services. The beautiful thing about talking about prearranging your funeral is that you can shop around, like we were saying before. You have the right to be comfortable with who you're working with. Every single funeral home that you're going to come into contact with is going to have different staff, different facilities, different prices. So it's very important to make certain that you're comfortable with who you're using, because your family could choose somebody that is a larger price point, and you know the guy down the road does just as good of a job, but if you're not vocal about it, how are they going to know? So planning ahead of time is wonderful. Another important thing, like Joelle was saying, documentation. There is a legal right. There is a legal level of who has the right to control your disposition. I got it out eventually. Basically meaning that whatever state you're in, that state has guidelines stating that so-and-so is your next of kin, followed by the next person, followed by the next person. You cannot like who your legal next of kin is. So there is documentation that you can take care of ahead of time, where, for instance, myself personally, I'm married. If I don't want my husband controlling my funeral, but I want Joelle, who knows my wishes, to control my funeral, I can fill out documentation ahead of time, and she has the right to do that over my husband. But once again, if you're not doing this when you're living, when you pass away, the law comes into effect.
More paperwork, it sounds like, for all of us, but important paperwork, of course. Joelle, you consider yourself an alternative funeral director. Tell us what an alternative funeral is, and what are some of the more interesting things that you have seen folks do to celebrate their lives and their community?
So Kim, traditionally when we think about a funeral service, like Lauren was saying, we think about the embalming, the viewing, the wake, the service, the burial, or cremation, right? So what I do is I focus on celebrating more of the essence of who the individual was and bringing that more to the forefront in creative ways. Like Lauren was saying, there's several alternatives, from becoming a tree, burial at sea, becoming a record, becoming a diamond. But one of the most interesting things that I've done was participate in a space burial. There's a company that puts what they refer to as a symbolic amount of cremated remains and into a capsule, attaches it to a rocket ship, and sends it out into space on several different levels. You can go to the moon and come back. You can go, out of Earth's orbit and come back, or you can just do what they call the Voyager experience and go completely out into space forever. So that's one of the more interesting things that I've seen. But for alternative funeral, to me, it just means thinking outside of the box, pun intended, and doing things that represent who that individual was in creative ways.
Yeah, that sounds really fun, and like a nice way to help the people that are left behind to really be able to commemorate you. I didn't even realize that people were doing such interesting or creative things. My father-in-law, nothing as creative or off the kind of different as that, but my father-in-law, was really impressive in the end. He was a professional opera singer in Baton Rouge, very well known, and he sung across all of these different choruses. So when he died, he wrote his entire memorial service, and he asked for 4 choruses from across the county to come together and sing his favorite songs. And it was incredible to watch, because here were these, and there were these 4 choruses. He was one of the few soloists who sung at both the white and the black churches. And so he had churches, all 4 big major churches, and they were singing all of his favorite songs. And for those of us who were experiencing it, it was like nothing you had ever experienced. The only moment that I had was, I thought, wow, like, he doesn't get to appreciate this in the way that we got to, which makes me ask you, what about living? I see more people doing kind of living memorials where you're celebrating before the person dies. Is that something that you're seeing more and more of? And how does somebody go about that?
Oh, for sure. And I think the thing that's really pushing the living funerals is that we have more women in the industry. And as you know, as women, we're more expressive and we're more creative. And I think the importance of the living will is that, or the living memorial, is that you get to see and hear exactly how your loved ones feel about you, and you get to reciprocate that energy prior to your passing. And just another note on alternative funerals, if that's okay. It doesn't have to be as grand as sending your loved one to space or sending yourself to space. Like Lauren was saying, people hold on to ashes for years and years and years. I recently had a client whose mother was an artist. And what we did to celebrate her mother's, I think it was the 5th anniversary of her passing, we mixed some of her ashes into paint. And she and her children, the mother's grandchildren, made beautiful pieces, and they were just so simple. One was a smiley face. So the little personal touch that celebrated who her mother was meant a lot to her family. So don't think you have to send yourself or your loved one out to space. Think about ways and things that you can do to incorporate who you were or who that person was to you.
That's great. Lauren, did you have any adventurous clients you wanted to share what they did?
I actually did a pre-arrangement for a woman a couple of years ago, and when she had come in, she was terminally ill, and she was explaining to me that throughout her entire life, she was known for throwing very specific parties. So everything would always have a theme. So that's how she was known from all of her family and friends. We're going to her house. We have to participate in this theme. It's going to be amazing. So when she had come in to make her pre-arrangements with me, she disclosed that she wanted to have a circus-themed funeral because that was one theme that she never got to do with her parties while she was living. And I am sad to say that she has since passed away, and she did have her circus funeral.
Oh, how wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, it looks like we are at the time to open the floor up to questions. So I'm going to turn things back over to Mickey and let him take it away.
We have a lot of questions out there, and a lot of questions kind of around the alternative funeral space, in particular around green burials. And so we wanted to just check in. I think the biggest question that folks have is, if you all know of what might be the best place or way to be able to identify where one can have a green burial. Whether it's a traditional cemetery, are they catching up, or specific cemeteries around that, or can you just bury someone out in the woods, or is there a list or something?
There is, the Green Burial Council is a great resource for everything green burial and natural burial. Not all cemeteries allow for green burial. There are cemeteries that require vaults, and most vaults are either plastic or metal to protect the integrity of the ground. So if you're seeking a green burial, that may not be an option for you, but the Green Burial Council is an excellent resource.
Right. Sorry, go ahead, Lauren.
No, we have a good friend and colleague within the industry too. Her name is Melissa Unfred. She's a funeral director in Texas. She has dedicated her entire life to green funerals and green burials. And she has a little trick because yes, unfortunately, there's typically no laws that say you have to have a burial vault, but the cemeteries do require them. So it's their little way to get it in there anyways. And what Melissa will do for families if they're being buried in those cemeteries is she will actually flip the vault over. So the person may not be embalmed, they may be in a shroud or in a biodegradable container, and to go in line with these cemeteries, they're still touching the earth, they're still going back to the earth, but that concrete box is over them opposite way, if that kind of makes sense. So not completely green, but it works for people who definitely want that option, and it may not be available in their cemetery.
Right. And so the cemeteries have like, there's some traditional cemeteries that might have locations where green burials can be done. There are cemeteries where there can be, that are entirely green burials, and then, but looks like a cemetery. And then there are places that kind of look wild. Is that accurate? Like
That's accurate.
no markings or things like that?
Those are called natural burial parks, where typically when you're walking around, it's a very nature feeling. There are trees, things are overgrown. Typically there's no headstones. Sometimes the ground is marked by just a stone or memento that the family would put over there. So it's a little bit different from what we're used to seeing in our American way of death with our cemeteries.
Right. So thanks for that. This is kind of a historical question as well, although it's kind of resurging, particularly in not people of color communities, this idea of home funerals, right? And I know like particularly in some cases, like in some communities, there's more likely that communities, perhaps like in communities of color or in specific kinds of communities, are more likely to see or have a longer tradition of having the funeral at home. What are you seeing today around that?
I think that especially with COVID, that's decreasing greatly because funeral homes are not wanting to have large groups of people there. And part of what contributes to that longer, the body being in the funeral home longer, is the fact that a lot of times with the concept of homegoing, we're waiting on as many family members and friends of the family to get there, but people aren't traveling anymore like they were before for funerals because of COVID. So I honestly think it's decreasing.
So are people doing funerals at home with just the immediate family?
There are people doing that. I personally haven't worked any home funerals. I don't know if you have, Lauren.
I have, and it depends on the person's culture a lot of times. I have done more home funerals and participated in them for people who are Native American, because that's their custom and that's their culture to have their services on their own land and in their longhouses. So it really depends culture by culture. What I have been seeing more of because of COVID is if a person does pass away at home, the families don't want us to come to the house as quickly as they wanted us to come in the past, because they know that they're not going to be having that large gathering like we're used to seeing. So instead, they're sort of having their little goodbyes and their visitation within their immediate family members in their home in that sense. So they're kind of taking their funerals and they're evolving as to what our climate is right now in our society.
Yeah. So let's talk though a little bit about pricing for funerals. And I am gonna, in our next report, I did some researching on, funeral comparison guides, but for you all, can you answer, Paul wanted to know, if you pre-arrange your funeral, do you have to pay for the whole cost when you do it? Is there a deposit and then the funeral company gets paid at death? And the second part of that is, how do you deal with not getting what your family member pre-planned and paid for?
So, oh, sorry, Joel, you wanted to?
No, go ahead.
So I've worked for a couple of different funeral homes, and this is why it's super important to shop around ahead of time, because you have to talk with your funeral director. Every single funeral home has their own regulations. I have worked for a funeral home that when you And let's start off this. Pre-planning and prepaying are two completely different things. Pre-planning is putting your wishes down on paper and making certain that the funeral home has that in their files. Prepaying is actually funding those wishes that you do have. So two completely different things. Some of the funeral homes that I've worked for, they do not guarantee their prices. Basically meaning when you come down, sit with me, and we go through all of your funerals, writing it all out in today's prices. If you pass away 20 years from now, even if you prepay it, your family is responsible to take care of financially any shortfall. I now work for a funeral home where you come in, we sit down, we pre-plan, prepay everything, and we lock you into the prices. Basically meaning that 50 years from now, if it's greater than what we talk about today, they will honor the price that's on the contract. So every single funeral home is going to be completely different. So you want to make certain that when you are sitting down and talking with a funeral director, you bring that up and you want to make certain that they are very clear about it. Laws vary state to state in the way in which you can prepay, whether or not it's insurance or a deposit or whatever it may be. It's very specific state to state. So that's why it's important to call your local funeral director and ask these questions to them, because they're going to be able to give you more specifics than Joelle and I. And then when it comes to families not maybe getting what you've selected, as long as you are filling out the proper paperwork, that's not an issue. Sometimes with the pre-planning process, merchandise changes, things like that change. But if you're doing a traditional funeral, casket companies are kind of one-trick ponies. So you may have a specific casket and a style and a color with one casket company. If they go out of business, the new casket company is going to have something very similar. So you don't have to necessarily worry about merchandise, because the funeral home will be able to match that as closely as they can.
Thanks very much. There's one more question area we want to cover, which is donating your bodies to science, right? So like there's a couple of questions on this. One is, if you donate your organs, can you, if you're an organ donor, can you still donate the rest of your body to science? What happens when you donate your body to science? And what happens when you donate your body to like a medical school? Either one of you want to take that? Lauren, I think you just did a YouTube on this, didn't you?
Yes, I did. So being an organ, tissue, and eye donor, once again, is completely different from donating your body to science. That can be very confusing. If you pass away in a medical establishment like a hospital, typically you will go on a hold, meaning that that hospital is going to be reaching out to your family to ask if they do want to donate any tissue, eye, organs. Typically, that's why you have your little license, like the little "I'm a donor," like heart on it, so you can let them know. Even if you want to be an organ, tissue, and eye donor, you may not be eligible at the time of your passing. There are certain criteria that you have to make certain that your body does meet in order to properly help somebody else and be a life-saving gift to somebody else in the future. That's something amazing. That's something that, once again, typically you don't have to take care of ahead of time, because your family can speak on your behalf. So make certain you're vocal to your family if that's one of your wishes. If you are an organ, tissue, or eye donor, you can still have any sort of services that you wish after the fact: viewing, visitation, embalming, cremation. The funeral home will be able to work with that. When it comes to donating your body to science, this is the paperwork that you have to fill out prior to your passing, because your family cannot speak on your behalf. Because when it comes to donating your body to science, everything goes. There is an amazing book out there by an author by the name of Mary Roach. It's called Stiff. It kind of dives into all of these different avenues that donating your body to science may mean, whether it is your cadaver being used to help medical students practice different procedures, to having your body be a crash test dummy for automobile safety, to having your body naturally decompose on a body farm to help forensics if they happen to find somebody in the woods to figure out how long they have been there. So those are two completely different things.
Wow. There's so much to know about this subject. Thank you both so much for your help and assistance with this. And I will share, Joelle, going to Joelle's website, she does this wonderful alternative practice and with great spirituality and deals with grief and has a wonderful grief toolkit and package and a booklet about how to do that. So please make sure you check out Joelle's website. Also, for the both of them, during the research for this segment and the next segment, I got to watch, I went and watched a ton of their videos on the YouTube for Little Miss Funeral and The Grave Woman. And they do a piece together called the 20, is it the birthday, what is it? The birthday, what's the name of the series? The Birthday Extravaganza?
12 Days of Birthday Giveaway.
The 12 Days of Birthday Giveaway, which really covers an incredible amount of territory around this subject matter, as well as introduces you to some amazing women who are really making change in this industry that I got to meet and talk to along the way with this research. So thank you both for doing this. I wish we had more time to spend with you, but we appreciate you being with us today. And we're sorry we weren't able to get to all of the questions.
Thank you, both of you, so very much. We're really grateful.
Thank you.
So the very next segment, as Mickey mentioned in the beginning, he's been with Compassion and Choices for about 15 years in various different capacities. So I gave him the very fun task of going and figuring out what is out there in terms of resources that our supporters might be interested in knowing about. So with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Mickey, and he's going to give you a really fun scan of all of the various tools and resources that are out there that are related to funerals and alternative burials, etc.
Well, whole end-of-life planning in a different way than we've ever really talked about it at Compassion and Choices on a website. And it may actually answer some of the questions that people had for the previous segments as well. And Kim, I have to say, we've been doing this for a long time. And, we did a conference a good number of years back. I want to say 10 or 15 years back, it feels like. And it was really hard to find resources around death positiveness, around living funerals, around documentation or all of that kind of thing. And it's amazing what is available today. I have so much to show you, and there is so much that I don't have time to show you, but I'm going to run through these pretty quickly. And our director and producer, Marcy, is going to put in the chat some of the resources as I'm running through them so you can play along at home. We'd be remiss with, it was great to have Lauren and Joelle with us, but we'd totally be remiss if we didn't mention Caitlin Doty. Caitlin is an amazing author, writer, speaker, an incredible speaker. And she has the YouTube channel, Ask the Mortician. She's written 3 New York Times bestsellers. She's totally death positive and is taking on the healthcare and funeral industry as a rabble rouser to change the way we think about death and our end-of-life planning and engagement. I have her website up here, and you can see her videos and her Instagram. I highly encourage you to watch a couple of her speeches. She's a little out there. She's a little out there, but I kind of enjoy it. You may enjoy it too, and certainly everybody that's been reading her books has enjoyed it as well. Now, we are going to talk a little bit more about coffins and burial before we leave that subject. And some of you may be aware of the Coffin Club, which gets started by some folks some Kiwis down in New Zealand. And National Geographic did a bit of a documentary on them. And well, I'll let them speak for themselves a little bit here.
Of living a life that's colourful and bold, and then you're told this is how your exit's going to be boring. She said,
what do you do when the music stops, when you're on the way out, but there's mounting costs all for the price of a stupid wooden box? Forget about the rub. You start yourself a club, a place to share and sing your song.
it's a final verse, but life goes on. So we started a club to make coffins of our own and save some cash and my house grow.
There's a workshop
and a place to make the tea.
This is where we get to play and make a splash on our final day. Forget the gold and mahogany.
I'm going down with Aldous.
Mine is currently used as a sofa bed.
Here's my glory box.
It's more than a club, it's our community. Forget about the rub.
So you kind of get the idea here. It's an amazing club, and they're sprouting out around the world. And I think there is a couple here in the United States. I did find one in Portland, Oregon. And it's pretty amazing to be able to watch folks. They've really turned this from just a creative solution around coffins to being a social club and an opportunity to really approach end of life in a different way. Now, there are some other, if you can't join a club, I will also share on YouTube, there are a ton of videos that will teach you how to make your own coffin. So just because there's not a wooden box near you, this guy from Boulder, Colorado would be happy to help you learn how to make a coffin. There are, as you can see on the right-hand side over here, a ton of other options around that. Now, if you want a more extravagant coffin, there are a number of providers who do great work in this area. And this is Crazy Coffins, which is a UK outfit, but they ship around the world. And these are all coffins and mortuary urns. And so you can do just about anything you like. I don't know, Kim, whether you see anything in here you'd like. I personally kind of like this Triumph right here, matches my car a little bit. But there's a variety of things here available. And it just gives you some ideas about what you might want to do or engage in.
So I'm on the practical side, and we actually had a New Jersey supporter who built her coffin and turned it into a bookshelf. So when you go into her house, it's a bookshelf. It looks beautiful. You would not realize it's a coffin. And then she showed me how she turns it over and takes the middle shelves out, and it is her beautiful coffin. And that's something that I would do because it's very practical, and I'm kind of a practical person.
So a little form and function going on.
Form and function going on.
Yeah, there you go. Cool. Okay, so we also, we talked a little bit about green burials, and I love this particular company. It's called Capsula Mundi. And they're based in Italy, but they again work all over the world. And they specialize in green burials and trees, so you can become a tree. So basically, this is a biodegradable egg, and they will place you in this egg in the fetal position, and then bury the egg and plant a tree on top, so that you have the opportunity to do this. So you've heard about, healthcare traveling and medical travel. Now you can go to Italy, a place that I would love to go for my final years, and just become a tree on the other side of it. The unique part about this, which is really kind of cool, is that folks, instead of going to a headstone or something like that, get to go and hug the tree and engage, and be with you in a very different environment. There are tons of websites out there about alternative burials and funerals. Now, some of the questions we got was, how do you locate a good funeral home, and around the pricing for funeral homes? And so this service is called Parting, and it actually helps you compare local funeral homes. So like if you type in your zip code, whoopsie, which I'm here in Cocoa Beach, you answer a few questions. Immediate need, burial. Yes, I would like to have a service. Yes, I'd like a viewing and a wake. Click on next, and all of the funeral homes that are in my area become available to you. And so you can look for the location that you're looking for, compare estimated prices. If you want to get a little bit deeper, you can click on this, and it'll give you more of a breakdown of their price list and what that means and what it includes. And then once you've made a decision about the funeral home or the 3 or 4 that you want to compare, you can go ahead and call them, and their telephone number is here and available for you to work with them. So this is a great way for you to be able to compare and shop around funerals. Funeral homes and funeral directors are often a great avenue as well for finding burial sites or eco-friendly burial sites or alternative funerals within your community, from what I was hearing from a number of funeral homes. Just recognize that there are different kinds of funeral homes, more traditional or conservative funeral homes. There's the funeral home, a mom and dad pop shop down the street. which may be limited in what it can do. And then again, if you go to the birthday giveaway, you'll meet a whole slew of funeral directors that specialize in things like burials at sea, the rockets, big parties, eco funerals, the whole works. It's pretty amazing.
And Mickey, we've, earlier we talked a little bit about living funerals and memorials, and I'm wondering if in your scan you came across anything related to living funerals and memorials.
Right. So there's a lot of living funerals and memorials happening, and I found an amazing group of companies that specialize in doing this work and now are doing it virtually as a result of COVID-19. And I had the opportunity to talk to Christina Andriola from New Narrative Memorials and Events. She's like a wedding planner for funerals and memorial services and living funerals. And this is what she had to say about what's happening.
Yeah, more people are embracing, like, if this is going to happen, let's get all my family and friends around. And even to the extent of some people being like, I don't want to miss one of the best parties or the best events of my life, and like I'm gonna have to miss it. And it's all these people talking about me and giving these great heartfelt speeches. And so there's that. And then there's also the like the documentaries that are coming out that are normalizing things like this, like Alternate Endings, I believe it's called, on HBO, that came out, has been really, really great for just putting that to the mainstream.
Like, what actually are you talking about?
It's like a birthday party, or like an event or a ceremony, like gathering all their loved ones in one space and having and giving speeches, like having favorite foods, favorite music, and just having a nice gathering with everybody.
I want to do this. I decide I want to do this. What do I do?
If you wanted to do something like this, I would say pick some music that you love, pick the people that you'd like to speak during the event, and then we'll help put a program together for you. I have some tips that I usually share with families. So for a virtual event specifically, I like to have two, pardon the pun, but two live speakers, and then a pre-recorded or a performance, and then a couple other live speakers. And by live, I just mean like in real time on Zoom. And then, yeah, picking any music or personalized elements that we can bring in. And a couple of my colleagues and I share the sentiment where think about this event as if you were doing an in-person event, and what kinds of elements would you have? Like, would you have a toast? Would you have certain people speak? And then there's more often than not a way to translate it virtually. The one thing that
We're going to pause that there. She speaks about so many amazing things, but we haven't got much time for it today. Some things to remind you of, though, around living funerals is that it's happening more and more because the people who are dying or who would like to engage in it are asking for it. So it's far less families throwing surprise living funerals, and more likely the person trying to make that memory themselves. She also recommends making sure that you do not make sure that you do actually share with people what's going to be happening at the service or at the memorial, and that it's a celebration of life, and giving some ground rules so people know what they're getting into and how happy it can be and things like that. She does have in COVID resources. She's working with another company now called What Life Web 360, and they have created this amazing guide for how to do a funeral or grieving during the coronavirus, how to do a living funeral or ceremony after someone has died during this time. It's a terrific step-by-step handbook. And Life Web 360 is like a digital scrapbook. And normally when she's doing a funeral, they'll ask people to complete and engage in this, and the pre-recording that people will share is this digital scrapbook that makes it possible to hold on to the experience of a loved one passing with great contributions, almost like a Facebook page, but it can be a little bit more permanent. And that also provides the opportunity to do it in a paper version once it's happened. And this is free of charge for 3 months, and then it costs some money once you get going on it.
So Mickey, I know we're sort of down to the wire with only 5 minutes left to go. So are there any final resources that you just think are so fabulous that you want to be sure people get to see before we close out for the evening?
Yeah, I'm going to give you one last one, and this is around around end-of-life planning. And this tool is called Cake. And basically what ends up happening is you log into it and you create kind of all of the answers to everything in your planning for your end of life, legal and financial, digital, health, legacy, what you want to do with your funeral. We had a question about pre-planning funerals before. If you don't want to do it with a funeral director, you can do it through this service. And then you can share your profile with your loved ones. That will then be responsible for making sure that they have the information and they have the availability. The cool thing about this is there's also a marketplace that you can find out information or companies that might be able to help you in your planning. And then also a ton of information, blogs, articles. So if you don't have the answer, you'll be able to find it, and you can see how they're organized over here on the right-hand side. Really amazing, free of charge to do this. And I think they make their money basically by if you move through the merchants and things like that. But generally, I went on here, I created a profile. It was super easy to do. They don't bug you. And there's so many resources for you to be able to find out how to answer some of the questions in terms of keeping your documentation, telling people what your wishes are, and engaging. There's even, in addition to the Compassion and Choices site, they also have advanced directives on this site. And those are pretty much, there's so many tools, Kim, it's like out of control. I could spend hours with you going over some of these pieces, but those are some of the top ones, okay?
Thank you, Mickey. It really, to see so many people entering into this space and this field and becoming more involved, whether it's the death positive movement or the growth of death doulas or all of these resources around end of life planning, broadly speaking, whether it's financial planning or planning for your funeral. It really is tremendous. It's tremendous to see the volume and the level of attention and the creativity that is taking place. And inevitably, it does give me hope that we will continue to be successful at realizing our vision and our mission of ensuring that people are able to chart their own end-of-life journey, and one that is consistent with their values and their priorities. So with that, I will close things off. I do want to do one final reminder to folks that we are a nonprofit organization. All of our programming comes as a result of the generosity of our donors. So if you are so inspired, we would certainly welcome a gift now, but you could also choose to leave us in your will or make a legacy gift. And we have an amazing planned giving officer, Sam Young, who would be available to help you with that. You don't need a financial advisor for that aspect. We do have a host of resources and tools, as well as the support of Sam, who is an expert. So with that, I want to thank all of our tremendous panelists who are here today. I want to thank Mickey for his work in putting this together and moderating the call. And a thank you to all the staff who are working behind the scenes to make this possible. And a thank you to all of you who stayed on a Tuesday evening until 8:30 at night to hear more about this. So with that, I will tune out and say goodbye. See you later, and thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.